The life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need. Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the others. More law, less justice. Glory follows virtue as if it were its shadow. The higher we are placed, the more humbly we should walk. Any man can make mistakes, but only an idiot persists in his error. Friendship improves happiness and abates misery, by the doubling of our joy and the dividing of our grief. A home without books is a body without soul. Silence is one of the great arts of conversation. To live is to think. Live as brave men, and if fortune is adverse, front its blows with brave hearts. The safety of the people shall be the highest law. Nothing is more noble, nothing more venerable than fidelity. Faithfulness and truth are the most sacred excellences and endowments of the human mind. An unjust peace is better than a just war. The wise are instructed by reason, average minds by experience, the stupid by necessity and the brute by instinct. When you have no basis for an argument, abuse the plaintiff. It is not by muscle, speed, or physical dexterity that great things are achieved, but by reflection, force of character, and judgment. The enemy is within the gates. It is with our own luxury, our own folly, our own criminality that we have to contend. A friend is, as it were, a second self. Cultivation to the mind is as necessary as food to the body. The sinews of war are infinite money. While there's life, there's hope. The greatest pleasures are only narrowly separated from disgust. There is nothing so absurd that some philosopher has not already said it. The function of wisdom is to discriminate between good and evil. What then is freedom? The power to live as one wishes. A man of courage is also full of faith. The greater the difficulty, the greater the glory. I prefer tongue-tied knowledge to ignorant loquacity. It is the peculiar quality of a fool to perceive the faults of others and to forget his own. The countenance is the portrait of the soul, and the eyes mark its intentions. The harvest of old age is the recollection and abundance of blessing previously secured. Brevity is a great charm of eloquence. Peace is liberty in tranquility. Memory is the treasury and guardian of all things. If we are not ashamed to think it, we should not be ashamed to say it. Orators are most vehement when their cause is weak. Whatever you do, do with all you might. The precepts of the law are these: to live honestly, to injure no one, and to give everyone else his due. Love is the attempt to form a friendship inspired by beauty. Hatred is inveterate anger. Death is not natural for a state as it is for a human being, for whom death is not only necessary, but frequently even desirable. Let us not listen to those who think we ought to be angry with our enemies, and who believe this to be great and manly. Nothing is so praiseworthy, nothing so clearly shows a great and noble soul, as clemency and readiness to forgive. Any man is liable to err, only a fool persists in error. Not cohabitation but consensus constitutes marriage. Nobody can give you wiser advice than yourself. Even if you have nothing to write, write and say so. True nobility is exempt from fear. No one can give you better advice than yourself. The pursuit, even of the best things, ought to be calm and tranquil. Thrift is of great revenue. What sweetness is left in life, if you take away friendship? Robbing life of friendship is like robbing the world of the sun. A true friend is more to be esteemed than kinsfolk. Time destroys the speculation of men, but it confirms nature. To be ignorant of what occurred before you were born is to remain always a child. If you pursue good with labor, the labor passes away but the good remains. If you pursue evil with pleasure, the pleasure passes away and the evil remains. Never go to excess, but let moderation be your guide. I never admire another's fortune so much that I became dissatisfied with my own. The spirit is the true self. The spirit, the will to win, and the will to excel are the things that endure. Nothing is more unreliable than the populace, nothing more obscure than human intentions, nothing more deceptive than the whole electoral system. It is foolish to tear one's hair in grief, as though sorrow would be made less by baldness. Nothing is so strongly fortified that it cannot be taken by money. In everything truth surpasses the imitation and copy. I am not ashamed to confess that I am ignorant of what I do not know. The good of the people is the greatest law. We forget our pleasures, we remember our sufferings. Nothing is so unbelievable that oratory cannot make it acceptable. A room without books is like a body without a soul. The authority of those who teach is often an obstacle to those who want to learn. Rashness belongs to youth, prudence to old age. He only employs his passion who can make no use of his reason. Insofar as the mind is stronger than the body, so are the ills contracted by the mind more severe than those contracted by the body. The only excuse for war is that we may live in peace unharmed. Old age, the crown of life, our play's last act. Freedom is a possession of inestimable value. Brevity is the best recommendation of speech, whether in a senator or an orator. Before beginning, plan carefully. As I approve of a youth that has something of the old man in him, so I am no less pleased with an old man that has something of the youth. He that follows this rule may be old in body, but can never be so in mind. There are more men ennobled by study than by nature. A man's own manner and character is what most becomes him. No sane man will dance. As fire when thrown into water is cooled down and put out, so also a false accusation when brought against a man of the purest and holiest character, boils over and is at once dissipated, and vanishes and threats of heaven and sea, himself standing unmoved. It is the nature of every person to err, but only the fool perseveres in error. The magistrates are the ministers for the laws, the judges their interpreters, the rest of us are servants of the law, that we all may be free. Justice consists in doing no injury to men, decency in giving them no offense. Every man can tell how many goats or sheep he possesses, but not how many friends. Next to God we are nothing. To God we are everything. Laws are silent in time of war. The nobler a man, the harder it is for him to suspect inferiority in others. I criticize by creation, not by finding fault. Rather leave the crime of the guilty unpunished than condemn the innocent. Advice in old age is foolish, for what can be more absurd than to increase our provisions for the road the nearer we approach to our journey's end? Take from a man his reputation for probity, and the shrewder and cleverer he is, the more hated and mistrusted he becomes. Sweet is the memory of past troubles. In a disordered mind, as in a disordered body, soundness of health is impossible. Just as the soul fills the body, so God fills the world. Just as the soul bears the body, so God endures the world. Just as the soul sees but is not seen, so God sees but is not seen. Just as the soul feeds the body, so God gives food to the world. So near is falsehood to truth that a wise man would do well not to trust himself on the narrow edge. In honorable dealing you should consider what you intended, not what you said or thought. Honor is the reward of virtue. Thou shouldest eat to live, not live to eat. Though silence is not necessarily an admission, it is not a denial, either. Great is our admiration of the orator who speaks with fluency and discretion. You will be as much value to others as you have been to yourself. What nobler employment, or more valuable to the state, than that of the man who instructs the rising generation? Those wars are unjust which are undertaken without provocation. For only a war waged for revenge or defense can be just. Great is the power of habit. It teaches us to bear fatigue and to despise wounds and pain. Of all nature's gifts to the human race, what is sweeter to a man than his children? He does not seem to me to be a free man who does not sometimes do nothing. Confidence is that feeling by which the mind embarks in great and honorable courses with a sure hope and trust in itself. Freedom is a man's natural power of doing what he pleases, so far as he is not prevented by force or law. Liberty consists in the power of doing that which is permitted by the law. O wretched man, wretched not just because of what you are, but also because you do not know how wretched you are. Nature abhors annihilation. Nothing stands out so conspicuously, or remains so firmly fixed in the memory, as something which you have blundered. Virtue is a habit of the mind, consistent with nature and moderation and reason. Natural ability without education has more often attained to glory and virtue than education without natural ability. You must become an old man in good time if you wish to be an old man long. Rightly defined philosophy is simply the love of wisdom. The rule of friendship means there should be mutual sympathy between them, each supplying what the other lacks and trying to benefit the other, always using friendly and sincere words. Frivolity is inborn, conceit acquired by education. Like associates with like. Knowledge which is divorced from justice may be called cunning rather than wisdom. Fear is not a lasting teacher of duty. Cannot people realize how large an income is thrift? A tear dries quickly when it is shed for troubles of others. That last day does not bring extinction to us, but change of place. I never heard of an old man forgetting where he had buried his money. Old people remember what interests them, the dates fixed for their lawsuits, and the names of their debtors and creditors. For how many things, which for our own sake we should never do we perform for the sake of our friends? To some extent I liken slavery to death. What an ugly beast the ape, and how like us. True glory takes root, and even spreads. All false pretenses, like flowers, fall to the ground, nor can any counterfeit last long. I add this, that rational ability without education has oftener raised man to glory and virtue, than education without natural ability. No poet or orator has ever existed who believed there was any better than himself. If I err in belief that the souls of men are immortal, I gladly err, nor do I wish this error which gives me pleasure to be wrested from me while I live. Nature has planted in our minds an insatiable longing to see the truth. What is thine is mine, and all mine is thine. In time of war the laws are silent. The long time to come when I shall not exist has more effect on me than this short present time, which nevertheless seems endless. Never injure a friend, even in jest. In doubtful cases the more liberal interpretation must always be preferred. Justice is the set and constant purpose which gives every man his due. In a republic this rule ought to be observed, that the majority should not have the predominant power. A letter does not blush. No one was ever great without some portion of divine inspiration. We must conceive of this whole universe as one commonwealth of which both gods and men are members. In everything, satiety closely follows the greatest pleasures. We are motivated by a keen desire for praise, and the better a man is, the more he is inspired by glory. The very philosophers themselves, even in those books which they write in contempt of glory, inscribe their names. The best interpreter of the law is custom. Hatred is settled anger. According to the law of nature, it is only fair that no one should become richer through damages and injuries suffered by another. What is permissible is not always honorable. Laws should be interpreted in a liberal sense so that their intention may be preserved. We should not be so taken up in the search for truth as to neglect the needful duties of active life, for it is only action that gives a true value and commendation to virtue. Every man's reputation proceeds from those of his own household. The false is nothing but an imitation of the true. When you are aspiring to the highest place, it is honorable to reach the second or even the third rank. One who sees the super-soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the super-soul is ever destroyed, actually sees. What gift has Providence bestowed on man that is so dear to him as his children? Hatreds not vowed and concealed are to be feared more than those openly declared. Ability without honor is useless. No obligation to do the impossible is binding. The eyes like sentinel occupy the highest place in the body. To know the laws is not to memorize their letter but to grasp their full force and meaning. All pain is either severe or slight. If slight, it is easily endured; if severe, it will without doubt be brief. No one has the right to be sorry for himself for a misfortune that strikes everyone. The study and knowledge of the universe would somehow be lame and defective were no practical results to follow. It might be pardonable to refuse to defend some men, but to defend them negligently is nothing short of criminal. What one has, one ought to use, and whatever he does he should do with all his might. For a tear is quickly dried, especially when shed for the misfortunes of others. It shows nobility to be willing to increase your debt to a man to whom you already owe much. Empire and liberty. This is the truth: as from a fire aflame thousands of sparks come forth, even so from the Creator an infinity of beings has life, and to him return again. People do not understand what a great revenue economy is. Our character is not so much the product of race and heredity as of those circumstances by which nature forms our habits, by which we are nurtured and live.